Hello and welcome to the World Wanderers podcast, a proud part of the Wander Barn Podcast Network.
I'm Ryan.
I'm Amanda.
And we're your hosts.
We're a traveling couple and digital nomads taking you on our adventures as we explore locations, destinations, and careers.
Enjoy the show.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the World Wanderers podcast. We are very excited for today's episode of the show because today's episode of the show is going to be the last episode of 2021.
And as always, at the end of the year, it's time to do a year in review episode. So that's what we're going to be touching on today, reviewing everything from the year 2021 and looking ahead at the year that comes after, which is 2022 this year.
Oh, really? I had no idea.
Yeah, a lot of people don't know that yet, but I looked it up and that's the case this year.
Well, excellent. So where should we start?
Well, let's start. I think a great way to recap it is to do a really quick run through of our travels from the past year, where we've been, what we've been up to. Do you want to go kind of turbo round through the places we've been since January 1st, 2021?
Yeah, sure. So we kicked off 2021 in Campeche, Mexico. Our original plan had been to spend the new year in Mexico City. We love spending Christmas and New Year's in Mexico City, but they ended up doing kind of a weird COVID situation where they closed a bunch of stuff. And so we pieced out of there early and went to Campeche. And for those of you who aren't familiar, it's kind of on like the southwest side of the Yucatan Peninsula. And it was really awesome to check out a new city and a new state. It is both the city and state of Campeche. And then from there, we headed to Mérida in the Yucatan. And then we were in Mérida for about a month before we headed to the US to visit some friends and to go to a wedding and some other fun stuff.
Yes, we ended up going to Florida for a week. We went to Atlanta for a bit, and then we went to Colorado, went to a wedding, which was such a blast. And then we also had decided at the start of the year that we wanted to get our temporary residency in Mexico. And so we did that while we were in Colorado. We had an appointment at the Denver Mexican consulate. So we went in, got that dealt with, which was really great. One of the big wins from the year. And then went back to Mérida for about a month more, right?
Yeah, I think it was about a month. We had to get the rest of our residency sorted. And while we were there, we took a trip to Chiapas, which had been on our Mexican bucket list for quite a while. Chiapas is the southernmost state in Mexico and it borders Guatemala. So we went there for an extended long weekend, saw some really cool stuff. We have an entire podcast episode dedicated to Chiapas. So definitely go check that out.
Yeah, Chiapas was very cool, something that had been on our list for a while. So we were excited to do that. Then we went from Mérida back to Mexico City. We spent, I think, about 2 weeks there at the start of April, filling in that time we didn't get to spend at the start of the year before going on to Puerto Vallarta. We had spent the fall of 2020 in Puerto Vallarta. And so we were back in the spring and had a great group of friends who were also there, which was a ton of fun. While we were there, we took a weekend trip to Guanajuato and a weekend trip to Mexico City as well, which were great places we've been already, but great to go back, especially go back in a group of friends.
Yeah, absolutely. We ended up spending 3 months in Puerto Vallarta. We spent from mid-April till mid-July. And then we flew to Querétaro, which you guys know is now where we call home. And we were there for a week before we flew back to Canada, where we spent 2 months visiting family and friends between Alberta and British Columbia.
Yeah, and then so as you'll have heard in a recent episode, as fall was approaching, we needed to get out of Canada. And so we were looking at our options and we decided we wanted to take a big road trip and drive back down to Mexico. So we went to Utah and drove all the way from Utah down to Querétaro in Mexico. And since we've been here, we've been taking kind of shorter trips around. We've been able to go to Mexico City again. And then we took about 10 days to go to Puerto Vallarta over the past couple of weeks and visit friends, get some time in at the beach before settling back in here for the rest of the year. And so that was 2021 in travel for us. Lots of Mexico, a little bit of the States, decent chunk in Canada as well. So yeah, lots of fun stuff.
Yeah, for sure. And as you guys know, it's been a pretty weird year with things continuing on with the pandemic. And while we do have lots of friends who have kind of endeavored to travel more of South America or Central America, even the Caribbean, we had lots of friends who went to Europe this summer. We just decided that we wanted things to be pretty simple for ourselves in terms of travel. And honestly, Mexico has become such a home for us, and also this place that we have so many places that we want to visit on our list. So it doesn't really feel like we're kind of like missing out on travels. But we've also had some pretty big life events this year. I'd say it's been like a pretty big year for us. I know you mentioned Mexican residency, which basically allows us to live in Mexico permanently. What other big things have we had on the go?
Well, I guess it's actually a little thing, but a little big thing is that we're expecting a child that'll be coming in 2022. So we're both really excited for that, and I think it's kind of been the biggest thing that's going on.
Yeah, so I got pregnant in May, and so I spent a really good chunk of 2021 being pregnant, and it's been quite the adventure, I would say, because it's just like you find out when you're, a couple weeks pregnant, and then the kind of, first trimester morning sickness and stuff like that kicks in pretty quick after that. And we decided not to really tell anyone for the first trimester. And so it's kind of hard when you live in a city and you've got friends and routines and stuff that you're doing and trips planned and stuff. And for me, I was just feeling so nauseous and so tired and just so turned off by food. So we did end up telling a couple of friends pretty early on just because we were traveling with them and stuff like that. And obviously, when you're sharing space and traveling with people and you're not doing well physically, they kind of wonder what's going on. But it's been really awesome. I'm gigantic now, and baby's growing lots. And our littlest wanderer will be joining us in early 2022. So 2022 is going to be quite a different year, I think.
Yeah, and I think for both of us, that's really kind of informed how we've thought about the past year, and especially the years ahead when it comes to travel, where probably prioritizing a little bit less of that novelty or excitement when it comes to doing our travels, and more of just wanting to do things that we know we're going to enjoy, that we're going to feel comfortable with, that type of thing. So, yeah, we still had a great balance of being able to check things out, going to Chiapas. We were able to see some new states in Mexico. Beyond that, some new parts of the states as well. So lots of great enjoyment and lots of great travel, but a little bit less of like the adventure travel than in past years, and probably will be the case for at least the proximate future.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it's kind of interesting because I think in the first bit of the year, it was kind of like the pandemic that was informing that. And then getting pregnant, it was like, okay, well, there's just certain places that we're not going to go right now, or I don't want to go. And then obviously, as we hit the end of this year, there's just certain things that I can't do being so pregnant at this point. Even like we said, we were just in Puerto Vallarta visiting friends, and there's lots of great like boat activities and hiking and stuff like that. But I'm pretty slow. I'm pretty tired. I'm not really supposed to be on boats that are bouncing around that could put me into early labor and stuff like that. So there are considerations and whatnot when it comes to, being pregnant. And yeah, of course, things are going to be quite different once we have our little lady here with us. We're going to obviously be switching up our travels, but we're excited to see what 2022 has in store. Before we get to talking about what's next, why don't we talk a little bit about some of our top travels of the year? So for you, Ryan, what was your top trip of the year?
Yeah, for me, a couple come to mind. I'm curious to see what you're going to pick, but if I had to pick just one, I would say our road trip down from Canada to Mexico. So we ended up picking up our car in Utah, driving through Colorado, just some beautiful country there. Down to Texas, we spent 2 weeks in Austin, which was such a blast. Got to spend lots of times with friends. We went to a University of Texas football game. So much fun stuff. And then continuing on that part from Austin down to Querétaro, which is the more adventurous part of the drive, but was really fun. We listened to some great music. Everything went super smoothly. And we just got to see so much of the country that we never had seen before and probably never would see unless we were doing that similar drive, driving through Nuevo Leon's and then Nuevo Leon, Saltillo, in Coahuila, and then San Luis Potosi, Querétaro, Guanajuato, bunch of states, which is also cool. So I think for me that would be at the top of my list. How about for you? If you had to just pick like what your top trip of the year was, what would you say?
Yeah, I mean, I think that one definitely stands out for me too. I feel like it was pretty exceptional in terms of this year. But I also really loved the trip that we took in February. I had a lot of fun on that trip. It was really great to see some friends we hadn't seen in ages just because of the pandemic restrictions and having been a little bit more grounded. So that definitely comes to mind. And I really had a great time both in Chiapas and Guanajuato. And we don't do a lot of group trips normally, but we had a really awesome group of friends that went to Guanajuato. And we honestly didn't do that much. We just had a really nice, beautiful Airbnb. We, got a chef in to cook for us. We did mezcal tasting. We went out for some meals. I feel like it was just a really relaxed, awesome trip. And I think that for me, that was one of the highlights of 2021 for sure.
Yeah, that was definitely one that was on my mind. Just a really cool, fun adventure. And Guanajuato is such a cool city as well. If you haven't been there and if you're planning a trip to Mexico, it's definitely worth doing. I think a lot of more people probably go to San Miguel, but I think Guanajuato is actually better. So definitely add it to your list if you're planning a trip. All right, and so kind of shifting from just best trip overall to what would you say your best food and travel experience was over 2021?
This is hard for me because I've spent so much of 2021 pregnant, and your food experiences are a little bit tricky when you're pregnant. I feel like I spent like 3 months in PV just feeling like I didn't want to eat anything. I ate some pretty incredible mangoes during that time. But in terms of my top food experience, I think it would have to be going to Volta Cafe in Merida and eating chilaquiles. I think they're just my favorite chilaquiles, and we just had a really good routine of going a couple times a week, and we would co-work with a bunch of our friends there, and the waiters all knew us, and we got really good service, and it was just a really kind of fun time plus a great food experience. I feel like it probably wasn't great for my waistline, but I don't even have a waist these days, so I guess it doesn't really matter. But I think for me, that was definitely one of them. So if you're in Merida, definitely recommend hitting up Volta Cafe. They have great food in general. It's a great space to work, but their chilaquiles are bomb.
Yeah, so many fun days when we were in Merida, just going over there, working for a bit, ordering some food. So that was awesome. And then I think for me, when I think about like my top food and travel memory, would be probably eating a ton of breakfast tacos when we were in Austin. I know it's kind of funny for someone who spends so much time in Mexico. I think a lot of people might be like, oh, like Tex-Mex food is like it's not authentic. It's not as good as Mexican food, which may be true in one sense, but it is something that's also different. It's unique. It's its own thing. And we both love breakfast tacos and kind of like that Austin style of like eggs and potatoes and sausage or bacon. And so we ate a bunch of breakfast tacos while we were there. So I think for me that pops to my mind. And then we also had lots of other great meals, especially Puerto Vallarta. There's so much good food there. And then also going to Mexico City, we tried Pujol, the famous restaurant, for the first time. Didn't really like live up as much to the hype. And then when we were also in Guanajuato, we had a private chef come in and cook dinner for our group, which was a blast and was an incredible meal as well.
I just want to throw it out there, and this is probably really obvious, but if you're in your first trimester of pregnancy, don't do the tasting menu at Pujol. It's just not going to be worth like, I don't know, the $100 or $200 that it costs. It's pretty expensive, and I was way too sick for that experience, I think. And so moving on, what was your top nature experience?
For me, the one that stands above all the others would be going to the Sumidero Canyon in Chiapas. We talked about this on our Chiapas episode. You've probably seen photos of this if you follow us on Instagram. just an incredible natural wonder and something that it does kind of hang out under the radar. Like I think a lot of people, unless you're traveling Mexico a decent amount, wouldn't have heard of it. People don't have it on their list, but you go and it's like going to like the Grand Canyon. It's something that looks like it's the Lord of the Rings. It's truly incredible. And so being able to go, we rented a car to be able to drive up and kind of do the overlook viewpoints, and then the next day go up in a boat. And there's points where it reaches up to 1,000 meters from the water straight up to the cliffs above. So that was a really cool experience. Definitely like an image that's burned right into my mind. And yeah, just a really cool nature experience. And so what would you say?
Yeah, so that was going to be mine as well. I feel like it just tops all the rest of them. I think maybe just adding to that list, though, I mean, driving through the US and then driving through Mexico was incredible. Like, you just get a different perspective of a country by driving, as you guys know. And so I think being able to check out that nature, even though we were just kind of passing through, was really cool. And then one other thing that I'll add to the list was we did a pretty cool boat trip for a friend's birthday at the beginning of May in Puerto Vallarta, and we went to the Marietas Islands, so Islas Marietas. It's like a national park there. We had actually been in the fall of 2020 to go scuba diving, but it was cool because we were on a boat and we got to take like a smaller boat in and kind of hang out at the rocks and play in the water and stuff like that. And I think that that's like a pretty cool nature experience in PV. And there's a lot of really awesome beaches that you can get to that are not kind of in the city as well. And we did a couple of boat trips down to those. And I think the nature in PV is just something that I would add to the list as well as just being pretty impressive. You think of PV as like the beach or maybe like the nightlife, the party scenes, but there is fantastic nature there as well. Before we get to the next section, we're just going to take a quick break to hear from this week's sponsors of the show. The world has changed a lot over the last couple of years, and one of the great things that's happened through the global pandemic has been that more and more people and more companies are working remotely. This means that if you're like us and you love to travel, you can now work from pretty much anywhere in the world. And if you're not able to, this might be a great time to be actively job hunting or trying to stay opportunity aware. And if that's you, then you need to be subscribed to the Daily Job Hunt. The Daily Job Hunt is a newsletter that gives you short daily inspiration and info, plus member benefits like custom pitch builders, career guides, role type assessments, and much more. On top of that, they've also got an audio version. So if you don't want something delivered every day to your inbox, you can head on over to your favorite podcast platform or wherever you're listening to this podcast and get the Daily Job Hunt delivered right to your ears. It's all free for you if you head on over to crash.co. So head on over, crash.co, get signed up, and start looking for that remote opportunity that you've been dreaming of today.
All right, so for the last one of these travel categories we have is the best Nomad spot that we spent time in 2021. What would you say?
This is kind of tough because I feel like I really enjoyed our time in PV, but I'm not totally sure that it's the best Nomad spot. It's definitely a great place to meet people. There's always people there. There's always, lots of nomads. There's great co-working spaces, but it is a little bit distracting. I mean, the weather's beautiful almost all of the time. There's so many good restaurants. There's so many good bars. The beach is right there. A lot of apartment buildings will have pools. So I feel like it can be a little bit of a distracting nomad hub. So for that reason, I think I'm going to go Merida because I think that it's a bit of an easier city to be productive in, and there's still a really good nomad community.
Yeah, I'm going to use basically the same logic in that it's Puerto Vallarta is awesome, and it is a place that like you can get good work done because they've got co-working space. There's so many people there, which is great. Really seems like it's becoming more and more popular as well as a place for nomads to think about. But I'm going to go with here in Querétaro. It's a place we visited for the first time. just over a year ago, actually, just by a few days. And so since we've been back a couple times and now we're kind of fully based here and are really loving it so far. So yeah, I'm going to go with here.
Is this your way of trying to get more nomads to come hang out with us in Querétaro?
Maybe.
There's a ton of co-working spaces here. This was one of the things when we did our Querétaro episode last year. We were talking with our friend Becky Gillespie, who was the reason that we ended up coming here. And she was telling us that there's so many co-working spaces here, most of which we haven't even had a chance to check out yet. So we'll have to hopefully do that once we're a bit more settled with the baby in 2022.
Absolutely.
So switching gears a little bit, we're going to shift into the work side of things. So obviously we've got the travel down, but with the work as well, obviously that's really important. And so this year we produced 27 podcast episodes with The World Wanderers. And I actually added up how many I did with my other two podcasts, Matcha Mornings and MBOM. And I think in total I produced almost 100 podcast episodes this year.
It's pretty impressive.
Yeah, for sure. And I think too, we brought the World Wanderers down to every other week, kind of in the height of the pandemic, because we weren't traveling as much and it was harder to find guests that were traveling because everyone was just very grounded and there's only so much pandemic talk you want to do. And I think that that's still very much the case. And we've really found a nice flow with every other week. I think that that works really well for us with all the other projects that we have going on.
Yeah, I'd say so. I'd be curious to hear what you guys think as listeners, if you prefer more regular episodes, but especially as we've been kind of doing longer term travels and haven't been making as much content about our own travels with the interviews, it kind of is a nicer rhythm.
Yeah, for sure. So, with the World Wanderers as well as with the other work that we do you want to share a little bit about, maybe like some highlights from your work? What are some things that went really well for you this year?
Yeah, it's kind of an interesting year for me. So, kind of starting the year, I was really focusing on growing my podcast production and podcast editing business. They went pretty well over the course of the year, kind of building that work up. I had a lot of flexibility. And then kind of towards the end of the year, a new opportunity kind of popped up, presented itself to me that I hadn't really been thinking too much about, but eventually decided to go for. So kind of a new, bigger project that I've committed to. It's kind of taking up like a lot of my days, but it's fun to work on.
A man of mystery with his work.
Yes, very, very mysterious. And then how about for you, Amanda?
Yeah, so I think that obviously being pregnant for a good chunk of the year has really played a huge part in my work, just since I spent a lot of time in the first 3 months of pregnancy napping, queen of naps. And then we were home in Canada visiting family and friends, telling them about the baby, just kind of zipping across BC and Alberta, seeing as many people as we could. And so I feel like work really took a back burner to that. And by the time we got back here, I was almost pretty well into the third trimester and starting to slow things down and stepping into maternity leave. So I feel like I didn't have a lot of really big, profound work things that happened this year, but I feel proud of, putting out, like I said, pretty close to 100 episodes of podcasts between the three shows that I do. And, I had some really cool opportunities with my yoga business this year. I was able to support some awesome yoga studios and, train more yoga teachers. And I just feel pretty proud of the work that I did get to do. And, it's been really fun continuing the World Wanderers. We had some really awesome guests on the show this year. We made some really fun episodes about the places that we were going, even though we're not traveling quite as much as we had been in the past. And I just feel like overall, things have been chugging along and I feel really grateful for them.
All right. And so when you look at 2021, what were some of the more challenging stuff that came up for you this year?
Yeah, I think the biggest challenge is kind of an obvious one, and that's just the ongoing pandemic. I think that it makes it really hard as somebody who doesn't really have a permanent home, who maybe lives in another country or countries, who moves around a lot. And I think this was, part of the reason why we decided to go for our Mexican residency. We just felt like things were really intense with the pandemic in Canada, and we knew we didn't want to live there full time. But also, it's kind of like weird when you have a tourist visa and your time's going to run out and you need to do visa runs, and every country's closed their borders, and et cetera, et cetera. So I think that having Mexican residency has kind of just made things a little bit more chill for us, and especially with the baby on the way and stuff like that. But I would say the biggest challenge has just been the pandemic. Like, I would have loved to spend part of the summer and maybe the fall, over in Europe or doing other things. And I think for us, we just decided, like, I don't want to have to take a bunch of COVID tests and jump through a bunch of hoops with restrictions and maybe get locked down somewhere just to try to see, a new city or a new country. And obviously everyone can kind of treat that how they want, but that's what we decided. And I think that it just made it challenging. It made it challenging to plan, even going for our friend's wedding or deciding when to go back to Canada, because Canada was so strict. And could we even go back to Canada to see family and friends? And then, having to ship our car across the border because you couldn't drive across the border at that point. And it's just kind of ongoing. And there's just a lot of extra things you've got to think about and do that make it challenging. So I think that that's, easily the top one for me.
Yeah, I'd echo a lot of that in terms of just always makes it interesting as a traveler when we're still doing some of these like rules and lockdowns that seem to not have a ton of sense to them and pop out of nowhere. So definitely echo that. And then I think for me, something that jumps up is a bit challenging is just trying to maintain like focus and like positive routines and all that stuff across moving around. Like we were kind of solid, but we did move around a decent amount in 2021. And it felt like, I don't know, maybe it was just kind of everything going on. Like when you were moving, it felt like more like of a bigger thing to go from one place to the next. But we were traveling, we went from Mexico to the US, back to Mexico, to a different side of Mexico, to a different area of Mexico, back to Canada, back to the US, back to a different part of Mexico. So lots of moving around. And I think one of the things as a nomad, it's always a bit of a challenge to try to maintain like the positive momentum you build up one place as you go to a new place. So I think for me, that's one thing that stands out as well.
Yeah, definitely. I think that is a good point. And yeah, we didn't, hit that many new places, I guess, this year, or go, across any oceans or anything like that. But you're right. Like we were moving around quite a bit. And, even in our trips to the US, we were spending, a week in one place, a week in another place, a week in a third place. And I think when you're kind of in between like Airbnb every week or so, it is really hard to kind of settle into your routine. It's hard to, settle into your health routine in terms of making sure you're exercising and cooking and getting groceries and stuff like that. And, then there's the balance of like, oh my gosh, I'm seeing people and friends and doing, in this place that I haven't been in so long. So I want to do things, like work's not the priority. And I think when I was reflecting, on my own with my own work stuff, I really did feel like in 2021, of course, work was a priority because we need to work to make money so that we can adventure. But it felt like it was kind of like a secondary thing to trying to see friends and do fun things and stuff after, 2020 being such a crazy year that it was. So yeah, I think now is a good time to shift into what's next for 2022. Obviously, we've shared, we've got our little wanderer on the way. So we're going to be pretty, I think, stationary for at least a good chunk of the year. But what's next for us?
Yeah, it's kind of funny looking ahead to the next year. I think in comparison to other years, there's not a lot of stuff that we have firmly planned. We've got our parents planning to make trips to visit us here at some point in the spring. So that's exciting. For us, we don't have, at least unless I'm blanking on something, I don't think we have a single travel plan for 2022.
No, not yet. I mean, between the ongoing weirdness of the world and then having a little baby coming into the world, I think we're just planning to hang out in Querétaro for the foreseeable future and hopefully maybe do some like little trips with her when she's a little bit bigger and that type of thing. And I'm sure some stuff will come up But yeah, it's kind of weird actually going into a year where we're like, yeah, we have a lease and we're going to be in the same apartment in the same city and we're probably just going to chill here for a little while.
Yeah, but I definitely am looking forward to it and kind of putting down some firmer roots in one place and kind of seeing what can come from that in terms of building community. It does seem like having a baby is a great way to get people to come visit you. Some of the places we've been in Mexico where we've tried to get people to come visit before, now everyone's got the motivation to do it. So should be able to kind of have some great visits. And then just kind of the most important thing, obviously, is just adjusting to life as parents, making sure we're doing a great job of that. So kind of having adventures and travels kind of is something that we can start to think about once we feel like we've got, the whole family on board and the little wanderer ready to wander. But before that, we're not really thinking about it too much.
I'm already planning out cute bathing suits for the beach. I don't know about you. I'm just kidding, kind of. But yeah, the podcast will continue. We're currently batching episodes for early 2022 while I'm going to be on maternity leave. And obviously, we're going to have our hands full with baby. So yeah, we're excited for the upcoming episodes that we have for the first half of the year. And if there's anything that you guys want to hear about, anyone that you want to hear on the podcast, make sure you're always letting us know. Now would be a great time to let us know about that so we can start getting some guests. But yeah, we're excited for, the new content we're going to put out in 2022 and hopefully all the new adventures we'll take as a family of 3.
Yeah, and as always, we really do deeply appreciate everyone who takes the time every second week to listen to the podcast. So really appreciate you. Definitely let us know if you're traveling to Mexico, what you're planning to do, or in general, just what your travel plans are for this next year. And then we'll keep documenting our story and kind of our evolution from like travelers to digital nomads with a baby, and kind of how it all keeps evolving. And I'm sure it'll be fun to do this year in review episode in 2022 and look at everything that's happened in the next 12 months from now.
Yeah, so we're going to be on a little holiday break for the next couple of weeks. So like we mentioned at the beginning, this will be the last podcast episode of 2021, and we'll be back in the middle of January with new content for 2022. And yeah, just also want to echo what Ryan said. Thank you guys so much for listening. We really couldn't do it without you. It's so amazing to connect with listeners from all over the world, to meet people who listen to the show in person. And we're just really grateful for you and hope you have a wonderful holiday season and Happy New Year.
This episode of the podcast was sponsored by The Daily Job Hunt. If you're on the job hunt right now or just want to keep your ears open to other opportunities, potentially looking for remote jobs and ways you can travel and have more work flexibility, you definitely need to be subscribed to the Daily Job Hunt newsletter. They deliver awesome content to your email inbox every single day with tips, info, strategies on winning job opportunities. You can also get the audio edition in your favorite podcast player. So to do that, go to crash.co and sign up for the Daily Job Hunt. Thanks for listening to this episode. If you want more, make sure to check out The World Wanderers Insider, available on Patreon at patreon.com/theworldwanderers.
For show notes, head over to theworldwanderers.com. Find us on social media at The World Wanderers Podcast and join the private Facebook community at World Wanderers, a community for travelers.
You can always get in touch with us at info@theworldwanderers.com. And if you enjoyed the show, don't forget to subscribe and leave a review. It really helps us find new listeners.
See you next time.